He laughed and said, "You really thought someone like me would ever date someone like you?" The words hit me like a punch to the stomach, even though it had been months since that conversation. My name is Zara, and I was sitting in the corner of that crowded cafe, sipping cold coffee that had gone bitter from waiting. Across from me was Rayyan, the guy who had been everything I thought I wanted, charming, confident, untouchable. And now, in front of our mutual friends, he had stripped away every ounce of hope I'd ever carried. I had met Rayyan a year ago at a company mixer. I was new, eager, trying to fit in. He was the senior marketing lead, famous for his charisma, his way with words, and the way everyone seemed to orbit around him. From the start, I had been cautious. But flattery and attention have a way of clouding judgment. He made me laugh. He made me feel seen in ways no one else had. We texted. We shared coffee breaks. He flirted. I believed it was mutual. And then that night happened. He hadn't called me out of malice, or maybe he had, but when he delivered that line, the air shifted. Friends stifled laughter, uncertain. I froze, my heart pounding, cheeks burning. I wanted to disappear into the floor. My hand trembled around my cup. Rayyan leaned back, smug and untouchable, and I realized something terrible. I wasn't just rejected. I had been mocked. Publicly. The betrayal cut deep, but it wasn't the punchline that hurt the most. It was the casual cruelty, the way he made it clear that everything I thought we shared was either a lie or a game he played for sport. That day, I learned that Rayyan's charm was a weapon, and I had been its target. Afterward, our dynamic shifted completely. I couldn't look at him without suspicion. Every compliment, every friendly gesture became a potential trap. And yet, work forced us into proximity. Team meetings, collaborative projects, even chance encounters in the break room reminded me that this man, my so-called villain, was still part of my daily life. I started noticing subtle signs in those early days after the cafe incident. The way he smiled at me when no one else was watching, a smile that felt mocking but could pass as friendly. How he seemed to test boundaries, enjoying the discomfort I tried so hard to hide. And the worst part? I realized I had begun second-guessing myself, wondering if I had misread him, if I was too sensitive, too emotional, too naive. That unease didn't fade. It lingered like a shadow behind every interaction. And as I sat there now, replaying his words in my head, I understood one truth with chilling clarity. Rayyan wasn't just someone I had fallen for, he was a man who thrived on power, control, and humiliation. And if I wanted to survive the game he played, I would need more than courage. I would need a plan. Because charm can seduce. But the truth can destroy. After that cafe incident, I tried to focus on work. I told myself that Rayyan's cruelty was an isolated moment, a lapse in judgment, maybe, or a joke gone too far. But soon, the small things began to pile up, tiny red flags that whispered of something darker beneath his polished smile. The first was favoritism. Rayyan had always been charismatic with the team, but suddenly, certain colleagues got subtle advantages, extra project credits, favorable schedules, praise for work they barely did. I noticed how he leaned in to whisper to them, sharing smirks I wasn't included in. And when I asked questions or offered input, he'd smile in a way that suggested patience, but there was an edge to it, like I was an inconvenience. Then came the secret calls. His phone, once casual and transparent, was suddenly always in his pocket or bag. If it rang, he'd step into the hallway or block the screen. One afternoon, I glimpsed a message, a name I didn't recognize, followed by a heart emoji. My chest tightened, but when I asked, he laughed it off. "Work stuff, don't worry about it," he said. But the shrug didn't convince me. Small lies started cropping up too. Meetings that ran late but were never on the calendar. Reports he said he submitted that apparently never existed. Invitations to team lunches he forgot to mention. I found myself double-checking details, rereading emails, mentally cataloging every discrepancy. And then came money. Nothing direct, nothing reckless, but small inconsistencies. Lunch reimbursements that didn't add up, gift cards that disappeared from the office registry, little expenses he claimed he'd covered that seemed to vanish into thin air. I didn't understand if it was carelessness or something more calculated, but the uncertainty gnawed at me. Each day, the emotional strain grew heavier. I started avoiding eye contact in team meetings, rehearsing every question and answer in my head. I felt like I was walking on glass, every move scrutinized, every word measured. My confidence began to wobble. Was I imagining things? Being too sensitive? Too emotional? I hated how much power this man, the same one who had laughed at me in a cafe, now held over my inner life. One evening, I caught him laughing quietly at his phone in the break room. Not at a meme. Not at a joke. I couldn't see the screen, but his expression was intimate, private, exclusive. I froze. Something about the ease, the secrecy, made my stomach drop. I told myself to breathe, to step away, to rationalize. But deep down, I knew I couldn't. The patterns were clear: selective attention, whispered messages, hidden smiles, small manipulations. And with each passing day, the fear that he wasn't just arrogant or cruel, but deliberate, grew stronger. The man who had once seemed untouchable, untouchably charming, was starting to reveal cracks. And those cracks were only visible to me. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. Not in my wildest suspicions. One late evening, while the office was empty and quiet, I noticed an email notification pop up on the shared project board. It was from Rayan, but the subject line froze me in place: finalized details, confidential. Curiosity overrode caution. I clicked. What I saw made my chest constrict with disbelief. Rayan had been diverting funds from the department's client budget, small amounts at first, then larger. Carefully labeled expenses, duplicated invoices, and accounts sent under the radar to a personal account. And then, the most painful part, all of it was tied to a lavish lifestyle I hadn't been included in. The dinners, the trips, the extravagant gifts, it wasn't for the team, not for work. It was for him. And for her. Her. Nadia. The same woman from the secret calls, the heart emoji, the private smiles. Everything clicked. The favoritism. The secret calls. The hidden expenses. The late-night excuses. It wasn't just arrogance or carelessness. He had been deliberately manipulating every detail, using work as a cover, keeping me oblivious while he siphoned trust, money, and attention. I slammed the laptop shut, but the disbelief didn't fade. I felt hollow at first, like someone had carved out a piece of me. Betrayal has a way of making you feel invisible, and that's exactly what Rayan had done. Every day I thought we were growing closer, every laugh and smile he shared with me, it was a performance. A mask for someone who didn't respect me enough to be honest. Rage followed, hot and sharp. I wanted to confront him, scream until my throat burned, expose him to the world right there and then. But I didn't. I knew that was exactly what he wanted: to provoke me, to lose my composure, to make me look irrational. Instead, I sat there in stunned silence, heart pounding, mind racing. How long had he been doing this? How many people had he manipulated? How many friends, colleagues, and even family members had been drawn into this web? Then came clarity. I wasn't just the betrayed girlfriend. I was the only one who knew everything. I had the screenshots, the emails, the timelines, the hidden smiles, the private messages, and now, this proof of financial deception. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was strategic, methodical, and deliberate. He had built a facade that fooled everyone but me. And that's when a new thought took hold: if he could play this game so carefully, I could too. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I sat in the dim office light and made a decision. Rayan had underestimated me. He thought he could laugh, charm, manipulate, and hide. But he hadn't counted on me paying attention. And when I acted, it wouldn't just be about heartbreak. It would be about justice. I was done being the victim. And I was about to become the storm. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of heartbreak, not just because of betrayal, but because the truth had finally landed, heavy and sharp, and I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to see before. I was not powerless. Rayan had thought he could humiliate me, manipulate me, and hide behind charm and lies. He had underestimated one thing: I had seen everything. Every secret smile. Every hidden message. Every misappropriated fund. Every betrayal meticulously documented in my mind, and now, saved on my laptop. The trigger came unexpectedly. I replayed one of the emails, the one where he had transferred funds meant for our department to his personal account. The words he had typed so casually, so arrogantly, made me stop breathing for a moment. And then a thought struck me like lightning: he had no idea I knew. And because I knew, I could turn this around. It wasn't anger at first. It was clarity. Pain had sharpened my focus. The heartbreak faded into a cold, steady determination. I realized that the betrayal, as crushing as it was, had given me an advantage. I had proof. I had evidence. I had patience on my side. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. For the first time, I stopped replaying his smirk in my mind. I stopped questioning myself. I stopped wondering if I was overreacting. Every doubt he had planted in me, the insecurities, the self-questioning, dissolved under the weight of truth. I opened my laptop and started organizing everything. Folders for screenshots, emails, transaction records, and personal messages. Dates, times, context, all carefully labeled. I wasn't just collecting proof. I was building a map of betrayal, a timeline that would make it impossible for him to wriggle free. And as I worked, a realization settled in, quiet but unshakable: this wasn't about revenge alone. It was about reclaiming myself. My dignity. My power. My voice. Rayan had built his life on deception and arrogance, thinking he could humiliate anyone who cared enough to notice. But I had noticed. I had seen. And I had learned. By dawn, the fear, the shame, and the heartbreak had been replaced by purpose. My hands no longer shook when I held my phone, my mind no longer raced with doubt. I was no longer the victim of his charm and lies. I was someone who had been hurt, and had turned that hurt into strength. And in that quiet, early morning, I made a vow: when the time came, Rayan's laughter at my expense would be silenced, and the truth would speak louder than any mockery ever could. Because the girl he thought he could humiliate? She was no longer powerless. She was ready. I didn't change how I treated Rayan. That was the most important part. I still nodded in meetings. Still answered his messages politely. Still laughed at the right moments. From the outside, nothing had shifted. And because of that, Rayan stayed comfortable, confident in his charm, secure in the belief that I was exactly who he thought I was. Someone beneath him. Step 1 was proof, undeniable proof. I didn't rely on just one email or one transaction. I traced patterns. I cross-checked invoices with finance reports. I matched dates from expense claims with photos he'd posted privately: luxury dinners, weekend trips, gifts that didn't match his salary. Every lie overlapped with another. It was like watching a spider web form, each thread leading back to him. Step 2 was witnesses. Quietly, carefully, I spoke to people who'd been subtly pushed aside at work, teammates whose ideas Rayan had taken credit for, junior staff he'd mocked behind closed doors, colleagues who'd noticed money discrepancies but were too afraid to speak up. I didn't accuse. I listened. And once people realize they're not alone, they start talking. Step 3 was timing. Rayan loved control, but what he loved even more was public validation. The company's annual leadership review was approaching, his moment. Promotions, bonuses, reputation. He was already bragging about it, laughing in the break room, saying things like, "Some people just don't belong in rooms like that." I knew exactly which room he meant. So I prepared quietly. I organized everything into a clean, professional file, no emotion, no commentary. Just facts. Dates. Amounts. Screenshots. Statements from coworkers willing to confirm patterns of manipulation and misuse. Step 4 was the trap. I sent a single, neutral email to compliance and HR, request to submit documentation related to financial inconsistencies and workplace conduct. Time sensitive. No names. No drama. Just a door opening. Rayan remained completely unaware. He joked with me one afternoon, leaning casually against my desk. "You've been quiet lately," he said with a grin. "Guess you finally realized people like us live in different worlds." I smiled back. Maybe we did. Because in my world, truth mattered. In his world, image did. And image only survives until someone turns on the light. As the review date crept closer, the tension built inside me, not fear, but anticipation. I double-checked everything. Backed it up. Practiced explaining it calmly, clearly, without anger. I wasn't planning revenge fueled by rage. I was planning exposure fueled by precision. Rayan still walked around untouchable, laughing easily, certain he was winning a game I'd never even been invited to play. He had no idea the board was already set. No idea the rules were about to change. And no idea that the woman he once laughed at was about to become the reason his laughter stopped. The morning of the leadership review, Rayan arrived at the office confident as ever. His tie was perfect, his smile polished, his swagger intact. He greeted everyone like a king returning to his throne. I sat quietly, laptop closed, expression neutral. On the outside, nothing had changed. The HR manager called the meeting to order. Rayan strutted to the front, expecting applause, validation, admiration. What he got instead was a folder on the conference table, labeled, "Financial Discrepancies and Workplace Conduct," submitted by Zara. A hush fell. He glanced at me, eyes narrowing, confused. I clicked the first slide. Screenshots of expense reports, duplicated invoices, transfers to his personal account. Photos matching dates with lavish dinners and weekend getaways. Messages proving favoritism and deception. Names of coworkers willing to testify. The evidence was clean, precise, undeniable. Rayan's smug expression faltered. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Every colleague in the room leaned in, reading the documents, whispering to each other. His empire of charm and control was crumbling under the weight of facts. The HR manager, composed but firm, looked up. "Mr. Rayan, these documents require an immediate investigation. Misappropriation of funds and workplace misconduct are serious offenses." I could feel the tension vibrating in the air. Rayan tried to defend himself, but his explanations sounded hollow, rehearsed. Every excuse he had once used to belittle me now seemed pathetic. Every lie unraveled in front of the people who mattered most, people whose respect he had once commanded. Then came the final blow. I presented a timeline linking his secret affair with Nadia to company resources, gifts, dinners, and personal expenses funded indirectly through client accounts. The room went silent. His reputation, carefully curated for years, lay in ruins. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not embarrassment, real fear. Colleagues who had once admired him looked at him with disbelief. The HR manager signaled for security, and he was escorted out quietly, murmuring protests no one listened to. I leaned back in my chair, letting it sink in. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't raged. I hadn't called him out publicly on Instagram or at a party. I had let truth and precision do the work. And it had destroyed him faster, cleaner, and more completely than any outburst ever could. Later, as the office buzzed with whispers and speculation, I walked out into the sunlight, my chest lighter than it had been in months. Rayyan's laughter, once a weapon used to wound me, was replaced by silence, and I realized something incredible. I was free. Truly free. The sweetest part? He had underestimated me at every step. He had laughed, mocked, and humiliated, never imagining that the one person he thought powerless would become the force that ended him. And in that moment, I understood, sometimes, the most satisfying revenge is not anger, it's justice served perfectly. The weeks that followed were surreal. Rayyan was no longer the untouchable figure he had been. HR investigations confirmed every discrepancy I had documented. Colleagues who had once quietly admired him now avoided his office, whispers of disapproval replacing the laughter he had once commanded. The man who had mocked me, who had questioned whether someone like me could ever matter, had become a cautionary tale. His reputation was shattered. And me? I felt a freedom I hadn't experienced in months. The anxiety, the sleepless nights, the constant self-doubt, they all melted away, replaced with clarity and strength. I realized I didn't just survive the betrayal, I had transformed it into power. I reclaimed control, not just over the situation, but over my own story. Friends and coworkers approached me, some with gratitude, others with quiet admiration. "I didn't know you saw it all," one whispered. "You handled it so perfectly." And I realized they were right. I hadn't reacted out of anger, I hadn't screamed or shamed him publicly. I had let truth and precision do the work. That restraint made every revelation sting sharper, and every consequence hit harder. I took long walks that evening, breathing in the cold air, feeling the weight of his deception lift from my shoulders. Each step felt like reclaiming space that had been denied to me, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. I was stronger now, wiser, and no longer vulnerable to the arrogance of someone who thought they could dictate my worth. And there it was, poetic justice. The man who laughed at me, who made me feel small, who dismissed me as powerless, he had been undone by the one thing he had underestimated most, me. Sometimes, revenge isn't about anger. It's about patience, precision, and letting the truth speak when the time is right. Rayyan's empire of charm, his laughter, his untouchable confidence, they all collapsed silently, leaving him exposed, humiliated, and irrelevant. So, I ask you, yes, you watching this, have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, someone who thought they could humiliate or manipulate you? Have you ever felt powerless, dismissed, or invisible? Share your stories in the comments below. Let's remind each other that strength often comes quietly, and the most satisfying victories are earned, not shouted. And one last thought before you go, he laughed thinking he was untouchable, but in the end, it was the laughter that destroyed him, and the one he mocked? She walked away stronger, untouchable, and unstoppable. Subscribe if you believe in justice served perfectly, and remember, never underestimate the quiet ones, they often see everything.